Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bama Breakdown. I'm your host, Bryant, and this is your show for everything Alabama football. Today, we will be talking about the upcoming game against Duke and breaking down this season's schedule. This weekend, Alabama will play Duke in the 2019 Chick-fil-A kickoff game in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm looking forward to seeing how our defense does after losing some of our biggest components. But we did get back some of the biggest playmakers from last year, including Shaquem Carter and Terrell Lewis coming off of an injury. Also, Anthony Jennings coming off of an injury, and Raekwon Davis. They will be great additions to have back to the defense. Our offensive passing game should be pretty strong since Devontae Smith, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, and Terrell Shavers have returned this year, resulting in almost the same wide receiver core that we had last year, which will be very helpful for Tua and the rest of the offense. We will also be excited to see how the new wide receivers do and how the offense operates differently this year under Steve Sarkisian. So we have to talk about the running back core. After losing Najee Harris and Josh Jacobs last year to the draft, we will see Najee Harris and Brian Robinson definitely be the top backs in the backfield. Our number 3 this year would have been Trey Sanders, but he'll be out for the year after he got injured in practice this year. That's a horrible loss for our running backs. But hopefully he'll have some time to look at the playbook and figure out how our offense runs, so he'll be back and even better next year. Also, I'm very excited to see that we might actually have a kicker this year. After looking at some stats and film, it looks like he's been doing pretty good. I believe that he will also be our punter this year. It's very exciting to maybe have a good kicker this year because we haven't been able to get anything done in terms of having a kicker. This could also be a false alarm because we also got excited when all of our kickers from the past went 4 for 4 in a game, then missed a bunch of kicks later. Now I'll break down the schedule. During the segment, you should see a schedule pop up on the screen right now. Alrighty, now we can go over it. So, on next Saturday, on August 31st, we will play the Duke Blue Devils in Atlanta, Georgia for the Chick-fil-A kickoff game. This will be a very exciting game because it's the first game of the season. And we'll get to see our offense and defense for the first time. Hopefully no one gets hurt because it should be a game that we can take care of business pretty easily. Next, on September 7th, we will play New Mexico State in Tuscaloosa. That should be a pretty easy cupcake game. Then moving on, we will play in Columbus, South Carolina against South Carolina. This will be a very exciting game to see because I have not watched South Carolina very much. So I'll be excited to see how Alabama does in their first SEC game and the first time playing South Carolina in a while. Then moving on to Southern Miss in Tuscaloosa. We'll play Southern Miss on September 21st in Tuscaloosa. That should be a pretty easy cupcake game. And then moving on September 28th, we will play Ole Miss in Tuscaloosa. It should be a good game to watch, being our first SEC West matchup. We beat them pretty good last year, but I have not seen that much film or anything on them this year, so they could be better, but I doubt it should be that hard of a game. Then, on October 12th, we will play in College Station, Texas, at Texas A&M. This should be an interesting game because they have a very strong schedule this year, and if they can take care of business, they could have a route to the college football playoff. They play Georgia, LSU, Alabama, and Clemson, who are some of the top teams in the CFB right now. And if they can win at least 2 of those games, preferably, probably, to help their odds, if they beat LSU and Georgia, and then play Alabama and Clemson very closely and competitively, they could have an interesting route to be the first 2-loss team in the playoff, and also be the second time that 2 SEC teams have gotten into the playoff. So that will be a very exciting game to watch. And then moving on to October 19th, a rivalry game in Tuscaloosa where Alabama will play the University of Tennessee. This will be a very exciting game because it's a rivalry game, the first rivalry game this year, but it should be a pretty easy game. Hopefully Alabama can continue their streak of beating Tennessee and make it to 11 straight games that Alabama has played Tennessee and won. That's longer than a lot of Alabama fans have even been alive. So that's a long era of dominance against Tennessee. Then moving on, we will play in Tuscaloosa, Arkansas. That should be a pretty normal game. Just take care of business and move on. Help us in the SEC if we can beat them. That'll also be the homecoming game. So for anyone that cares about that. And then moving on, we will play LSU, the first real big tester, unless if Texas A&M turns out to be what I heard the other day about them possibly making it to the playoff. But I think that would be kind of a slim chance. But if that doesn't happen, then LSU would be our first real tester. They did lose their star middle linebacker, Devin White, to the NFL, who was supposed to be a very, very big part in them trying to beat us. And then he was out because of a targeting call for the first half. So everyone was kind of mad about that. But then he didn't really do anything after we beat them 29-0 last year. So that will be an interesting game. See how LSU performs this year. And going on, we will play Mississippi State in Starksville, Mississippi, on November 16th. This should be just another pretty easy game, but it's always kind of hard to play in Starksville because of all the cowbells. It's very loud there. Trust me, I've been to an Alabama game, and I heard someone bring in a cowbell, and just one was like really loud. I couldn't barely even imagine what it's like to have all of the thousands of cowbells going out at the same time. It should be, you'd think it would be really hard for these college players, but they've shown that they can take care of business there in Starksville pretty easily, so hopefully they can do that again. Then the second to last game on November 23rd, we will play at home against Western Carolina. Just another pretty simple cupcake game. And then moving on, the big game on November 30th, we will play at Auburn in Auburn, Alabama. This will definitely be, for a lot of people, the most exciting game of the season because, I mean, you get to play Auburn, and playing in Auburn, hopefully we can beat on them and make fun of all the Auburn fans in our life. But it should be an exciting game. They could turn out to be a pretty decently good team this year. We'll have to see what they do against Oregon this coming week. They could end up being a really good team, or they could also end up being just kind of a belly flop. We'll have to see how they do with their new quarterback. I believe their quarterback this year will be Bo Nix after they lost Jared Stidham to the NFL. So that'll be very exciting to see how Auburn performs this year. That was the first episode of the Bama Breakdown. Tune in next week to hear more about last week's game and the next game upcoming, and any other Alabama football news coming up. I'm your host, Bryant, from B-Man Films, signing off.